Thousands of Venezuelans poured across the border into Colombia on Sunday to buy essential goods during a brief opening of the border that's been closed for nearly a year. Venezuela. After ordering the border closed last August for security reasons, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro authorized a maximum 12-hour opening of the pedestrian bridge that connects Táchira, Venezuela, and Cúcuta, Colombia. Economically ravaged Venezuela has suffered food and medicine shortages for months, a ripple effect from the falling price of oil, the country's primary export. Critics also blame grave mishandling of the state-led economy. Some 500 desperate Venezuelans illegally stormed the border earlier this week in search of basic goods. "There's no medicine for children, children are dying," Tulia Somoza told AFP as she eagerly shopped among the masses in this border city. "People don't even have soap to wash clothes. Some people even spent the night in parked vehicles to get a good spot in line for the early opening." According to a tweet from William Villamizar, governor of the Norte de Santander department that includes Cúcuta, some 25,000 people surged in within the first 7 hours. "Serious humanitarian situation. Thank God," was the motto of the day as Venezuelans stocked up on flour, oil, toilet paper, and shampoo. "Thank you for this welcome. The people of Venezuela are experiencing a serious humanitarian situation," said José Gregorio Sánchez, a resident of the border town of Urena. The Venezuelan government halted the industries that supplied the population, Sánchez told AFP, noting that the devalued Venezuelan currency does make it more expensive to shop in Colombia, but it's much cheaper than the Venezuelan black market. Shortages as high as 80% followed the global dip in oil prices, a devastating blow to a South American country whose oil and gas reserves account for 96% of its exports. Colombia deployed 300 police officers to Cúcuta to monitor two of the city's largest supermarkets following reports of shoving early Sunday. Many arrived by car after crossing into Colombia, but some were transported from the border in security vehicles sent out for the occasion. Maduro, an elected socialist, has blamed an economic war caused by right-wing bosses for the mass shortages. In a sign of Maduro's concern at mounting social unrest, the president on Thursday replaced the head of the National Guard. The Venezuelan opposition launched its efforts to remove the president after winning control of the legislature in January. But Maduro has challenged his rivals through the Supreme Court, which they accuse him of controlling. Maduro ordered the border shut in August 2015 after former Colombian paramilitaries attacked a Venezuelan military patrol and wounded 3 soldiers, causing a diplomatic row between the neighboring countries. The two ministers of defense from both countries met last week to discuss potentially reopening border gates on the 2,000 kilometer, 1,250 mile stretch separating the countries. Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos and his Foreign Minister Maria Angela Holguin also visited Cúcuta last week to push for a reopening. Tens of thousands of Venezuelans have poured across into neighboring Colombia to buy basic goods amid shortages at home, during a brief opening of the border that has been closed for almost a year. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro closed the border in August 2015, citing smuggling and penetration by Colombian fighters. On Sunday, he authorized a 12-hour opening of the pedestrian bridge that connects Táchira in Venezuela and Cúcuta in Colombia, for the first time in 11 months. Victor Bautista, the director of the Colombian Border Authority, said that an estimated 35,000 Venezuelans had arrived in Cúcuta. Some 25,000 people surged in within the first 7 hours, William Villamizar, governor of the Norte de Santander department that includes Cúcuta, said on Twitter. "Thank you for this welcome. The people of Venezuela are experiencing a serious humanitarian situation," José Gregorio Sánchez, a resident of the border town of Urena, told the AFP news agency. Venezuela has been mired in a deepening economic crisis that has emptied shop shelves and created a shortage of medicine. The recent slump in oil prices devastated the OPEC nation's economic model, leading to growing anger among the roughly 30 million residents. Critics also blame grave mishandling of the state-led economy. Maduro, elected in 2013 after the death of President Hugo Chavez, insists that he is the victim of an economic war led by businesses with the backing of the United States. Some 500 desperate Venezuelans illegally stormed the border earlier this week in search of basic goods. "There's no medicine for children, children are dying," Tulia Somaza told AFP. "People don't even have soap to wash clothes." In a sign of Maduro's concern at mounting social unrest, the president replaced the head of the National Guard on Thursday. The Venezuelan opposition launched its efforts to remove the president, including a bid for a recall referendum, after winning control of the legislature in January. But Maduro has challenged his rivals through the Supreme Court, which they accuse him of controlling. Maduro ordered the border shut last year after former Colombian fighters attacked a Venezuelan military patrol and wounded 3 soldiers, causing a diplomatic row between the neighboring countries. 500 hungry Venezuelan women have stormed across a bridge into Colombia, defying a year-long border closure in search of basic foodstuffs and goods which are hard to find back home. Dressed in white t-shirts, the women from the Venezuelan town of Urena marched up to the barriers manned by members of the National Guard. The guardsmen formed a cordon to prevent the women from passing, but they eventually broke through, cheering as they ran across the bridge into the Colombian city of Cucuta. The women of Urena decided to come to the international bridge to cross the border because we don't have food in our homes, our children are going hungry, there is a lot of need, one woman told the Cucuta Daily Law Opinion. The women poured into the markets and shops of the Colombian city, snatching up toilet paper, flour, cooking oil, corn flour, and other goods hard to find back home. Because of the exchange rate between the Venezuelan bolivar and Colombian peso, and the lack of subsidies in Colombia, the women who forced their way across the border on Tuesday may have paid 10 times the price for the goods they bought compared to the official prices at home. But their complaint was that the goods cannot be found in Venezuela. Venezuela is rich in oil, but dogged by chronic shortages of basic goods and essential medicines, which critics of President Nicolas Maduro blame on gross mismanagement of the economy. Government supporters say empty store shelves are caused by an economic war against his socialist government. Maduro then declared a state of emergency in the border regions, and had more than 1,300 Colombians who had been living illegally in Venezuela deported. An estimated 19,000 other Colombians left in fear of deportation, causing a brief immigration crisis in Colombia and raising tensions between the neighboring countries. The defense ministers of both countries met last week to begin talks about border security with the hope of reopening the official crossings between the two countries. At the end of their shopping spree, the women, laden with plastic bags full of goods, filed back into Venezuela, chanting their national anthem. It wasn't much, but it was all she could afford: a sack of laundry detergent, a package of tampons and 18 rolls of Colombian toilet paper. Mary's Rosalba was carrying the prized goods back to Venezuela with a tight grip and a fierce look that said, "Don't even think of trying to rob me." The 3 items had cost her an entire week's wages. "I used to have my own little market," said Rosalba, 50. "Now I clean houses from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. when I'm not standing in line." Up ahead on the bridge over the Takara River was the border checkpoint, and on the other side an oil-rich country of empty cupboards and supermarket queues stretching for blocks. Cucuta, long known as a city of contraband goods, has suddenly become a lifeline for desperate shoppers in neighboring Venezuela, and one of the starkest illustrations yet of its panicky, gnawing hunger. Tens of thousands of Venezuelans like Rosalba have streamed across the border for basic goods in recent weeks as their country's economy collapses under the weight of the world's highest inflation rate and chronic mismanagement, which has produced shortages of everything from diapers to milk. Just days before Rosalba made her meager purchases, more than 120,000 Venezuelans poured across the border as both countries agreed to briefly reopen several crossings that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro ordered shut last August. An additional 35,000 shoppers did the same on July 10. They used to come here to sell. Now they come to buy, said Colombian shopkeeper Viviana Lozano, who had to hire 10 friends to cope with the crush of customers. She needed a money-counting machine to process their giant wads of Venezuelan bolivars, whose largest denomination banknote, a 100 bolivar bill, is worth only 10 US cents. It was too crazy, Lozano said. Some Venezuelans traveled hundreds of miles through the night on long-distance buses to make the crossing during the weekend openings. They hugged Colombian border guards and went racing for the supermarkets. Stuffing suitcases and duffel bags with as many items as they could fit and their bolivars could buy, they went home with sacks of rice, sugar, cornmeal, and milk powder, like sailors preparing for a long voyage at sea. It was a short reprieve. In recent days, border traffic has been much more limited. Colombian authorities, worried the growing crowds could spiral out of control, say they want to end the ad hoc crossings and reopen the border on a long-term basis. Both governments say they are in negotiations to do so, although Maduro administration officials have bristled at the Colombians' depiction of Cucuta as a humanitarian corridor. They insist the claims of spreading hunger are part of a smear campaign by Venezuela's opposition. But on Cucuta's border bridges in recent days, where a smaller but steady trickle of people are allowed to pass, stories of hardship and indignity appeared to be the only thing in abundance. Venezuelans with doctor's notes, kids enrolled in Colombian schools, and Venezuelans with dual nationality were among the lucky ones still allowed to cross. The Venezuelan economy is projected to shrink 10% this year, according to a recent International Monetary Fund report, and consumer prices are on pace for a 700% increase. Over there, you wait in line all day for a kilo of rice, and sometimes it runs out before your turn comes, so it's all for nothing, said Carlos Ortega, 68, a retired geology professor trudging home after a doctor's appointment in Colombia. His Venezuelan pension was good for only a few pounds of Colombian beans, sugar, and flour. This government has looted our country, he said, glaring at the Venezuelan border guards. And they're still doing it.